Welcome back, guys. I can't believe we're already in the last week of the Fit Chick Project. Today is day 21, and in today's show, we are talking to nutrition and hormone expert Sam Miller. Now, I'm really excited to have Sam on today because there's not many coaches that understand the body in relation to CrossFit training better than Sam. Sam is the coach that other nutrition coaches go to. And he's got a ton of different set of certifications, but he's most known for his knowledge around hormones, which are those things that are really responsible for building muscle, losing fat, getting hungry, etc. Okay. After a life-changing traumatic brain injury, Sam has spent the last 14 years separating the truth from the garbage and sharing his quest for health, fitness, and nutrition knowledge with the rest of the world. He's been featured as a 2-time Fortune 500 speaker at companies like LinkedIn. He has also been a masterclass instructor for top certifications like Nutritional Coaching Institute. And in 2019 alone, Sam guided and mentored over 100 plus nutrition coaches. In addition to his practical coaching and mentorship experience, he has been featured as a contributor, a content creator, and guest speaker for brands like Barbell Shrug, T Nation, Elite FDS, Next Level Human, and Primal Health Coach Institute. This guy is a wealth of knowledge. I just cannot wait for you guys to dive in and learn from him. Some of our biggest points of discussion were around, number one, his aha moment when he realized that pushing harder in the gym was sabotaging his results. Number two, why traditional diets don't work well for people that already work out and eat well. Number three, his recommendation on how to train and eat for women that do high intensity workouts such as CrossFit. Number four, signs that you need to switch up your diet and exercise routine. Number five, the best plan for women that are not seeing results in the gym. Number six, how to make time for rest without feeling guilty. And number seven, his biggest piece of advice for creating a fit lifestyle without killing yourself in the gym. So check out this video with Sam, and then once you guys are done watching, be sure to join his free metabolism school using the link below. And I hope you guys take away some really good nuggets, and be sure to let me know what your biggest takeaway is. Enjoy the show. All right, and without further ado, welcome to the show, Sam. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, I'm excited to dive in.
Awesome, dude. Me too. All right, so let's just go ahead and jump right into it. So just kind of give me a quick rundown of how you got into the work that you're doing today and what that looks like.
Sure. So I've always been, an athlete growing up. I wasn't necessarily the most aesthetic or jacked or ripped athlete, but I was always active as a kid. And my pursuit of health and fitness sort of started later in my teens when I realized, hey, controlling these different variables can influence how you look, how you perform. Like most teenage guys, I wanted to be stronger. I wanted to be, leaner, have a little bit more muscle. And around that same time, I actually had a pretty significant life event that changed my health status and forced me to learn a lot about hormones and metabolism and endocrinology. And so I was actually snowboarding, had a pretty severe concussion, TBI, and because your pituitary and your hypothalamus are such an important part of what your body does in terms of regulating metabolism, that basically sent me down this rabbit hole of basically learning as much as I could about my own health. But as a trainer, since that was kind of my side hustle, late high school, early college, and then even the early years after graduating, I realized like so many of my clients had issues that were more than just like the sets and reps and the calories of it all when it came to trying to reach their transformation goals. So I've spent over the last decade really trying to break this stuff down in a way that's easy to digest and easy to implement and understand, but it does allow people to see some additional layers beyond, what they see maybe just like from an influencer on social media or what they pick out in Shape magazine or Men's Health or Women's Health. Nothing against those sources, but sometimes they're not necessarily tailored to us. They might be good information, but it could be misapplied to our situation. And CrossFitters are so active, right. That type of population, I think that's where taking basic health and fitness information, there's some misalignment there. So sometimes you can have good information that's misaligned, or sometimes it's just misinformation altogether. And so I've really set out to try to dispel some of the myths and, clarify some of the different misconceptions that are out there to provide some truth when it comes to performance and fat loss, and also just living, a long and healthy life.
Yeah. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And that's exactly what I found too, is that it's more than just diet and exercise. When you see, people in the CrossFit gyms, they're doing the paleo challenges and they're in there working out, and it's like, they look the same 1 year later. And why is that? So what is the misconception, do you think, as far as in the CrossFit sort of world around looking fit?
Yeah, so I think what's interesting is, so CrossFit by nature is high intensity exercise. It's also can be highly varied in terms of, the periodization of it all. But oftentimes that leads to a significant amount of intensity and a good amount of volume. But conventional health and fitness wisdom, or just fat loss wisdom for people who are maybe just trying to lose 10 pounds, is move more, eat less. Well, so what happens though when you're doing metcons and wads and heavy lifting and things with high levels of injury risk that require skill to execute a movement? You've got to be sharp, you've got to be fresh, you've got to have adequate amounts of energy to basically execute those forms of workouts. And that's not to say that a CrossFitter can't ever go through a diet phase. It just means, hey, let's pay attention to our training and nutrition when we're trying to be more on the aesthetic side, or maybe more the physique and body comp goals. Or if we've got, CrossFit Open, or some form of competition, a neighborhood or city competition, or maybe you're competing at a higher level, we need to pay attention to the nutritional demands of the sport. And that's where I think people are there's sort of this disconnect in terms of following mainstream nutritional information as it pertains to diet and exercise. But then the form of exercise that they're doing is completely different than bodybuilding training or powerlifting or strongman, or even conventional cross training. CrossFit is really taking all of those and kind of ratcheting it up a notch. And initially, some of the athletes that I've worked with, there are women who like hundreds of more carbs than they would anticipate that they think they could actually eat, that they could eat, and stay fairly lean, just because they are so active and their energy demands are so high. And that's why understanding how metabolism works, we can begin to frame and construct much better programming and much better nutritional protocols for those athletes, in order to keep them healthy, but also, feeling strong, feeling energetic, and also potentially even improving body comp too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so, I think, most of the listeners are going to be sort of like your general CrossFitter, like just gym goer, mom, maybe business owner, or just kind of doing CrossFit for fun, not necessarily like to go to the CrossFit Games or, win CrossFit competitions, but rather just doing it for fun. And their main goal is they want to look fit. They want to look good, feel good. And so how would you recommend these women train and eat for that goal, and because that is going to be different from performance?
Yeah, and I know there's a social component with CrossFit too. So a big part of it is being in classes and being with your friends and being in that social environment and that network, kind of having a tribe of individuals. But when it comes to, I think, understanding like the seasons of your life and the seasons of how you want to look, training for a particular goal, you can execute the same workout at a different level of heart rate. As far as like, are you pushing this to like a red line level, or are you kind of going through this workout with the understanding that I'm going to stimulate my muscles, I'm going to stimulate my cardiovascular system, but I'm not going to annihilate myself. And I think a lot of CrossFit, even in the class environment, can be competitive to a point where everybody's, you're pushing to this place where, you're doing metcons and you're lifting at a high percentage. You're doing things that require technical execution and skill and work capacity, and all of those things combined are very demanding. So, for someone listening to this that does fall into that cohort, I would say, you still need to eat. It's not like just because she's a games athlete, so she gets to eat a lot of food. It's like, well, no, I mean, CrossFit as your activity of choice has a certain like requisite amount of volume and sort of demand to it that maybe you wouldn't find if you were just going and doing like basic body weight exercise, or you're just going to a gym and using some machines or something. So lots of compound movements and things that require a lot of energy. So starting those folks out, I would say first, become aware of what your current energy balance is. Like, what are you actually eating? Get an idea, maybe track, create some awareness around that. And in terms of training, obviously we want to do what we enjoy for the most part, but I would say sometimes, depending on the goal, like if we have less of a performance goal and more of a physique oriented goal, maybe blend some of those classes or some of that CrossFit with some accessory work or some movements that are designed to restore balance and symmetry to your body, and maybe view it more as like supporting movements for your CrossFit workouts. That can be super helpful, especially when you're in a period when your calories are a little bit lower. So I'd say depending on the goal, we would sort of zoom out and say, okay, well, how much food am I actually eating right now? What my current workload look like? If you're going to 4 or 5, 6 CrossFit classes a week, that's very different than doing 2 or 3 CrossFit classes with maybe an accessory workout or two, or doing an active recovery day, walking a lot, things like that. So typically, those women who own their own businesses and things, it's like sometimes we're overdoing the high intensity workouts, under eating a little bit, and maybe not getting sufficient non-exercise activity, just things like walking and basic movement that can really help overall health and body composition.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, that's really interesting because we think we're getting we think we're getting ahead when we push harder, when we breathe harder, when it's more intense. It feels like I'm, burning more calories, and it's like the right thing to do. And I can accomplish so much more in a smaller amount of time rather than going for a walk. And so why is it that, why is it that, first off, like, do you think that women tend to struggle with this more than men, that sort of holds them back, is that constant need to sort of go? And how do you recommend they actually pull themselves back from pushing that hard in class?
Yeah, so I think some of it is being aware of biofeedback. Men definitely have this issue. I wouldn't say it's exclusive to females. I've definitely seen a lot of guys who are training a lot and eating insufficient amounts. So I wouldn't say it's necessarily gender specific. I'd say it's common in females, but there's plenty of male cases where this happens as well. And what's basically happening is the body will perceive, the energy exertion that we have and the level of stress that we have relative to, okay, how much food are we actually taking in? It's sort of this miser. It's evaluating and throttling up or down how much energy we're going to expend based on what's available to us. And so if we're constantly priming our bodies saying, oh, you get low calories again today, low calorie meal plan again today, low calorie meal plan again today, but we're ratcheting up the high intensity exercise, it's just a disconnect for your body. It's kind of this mixed signal of, well, why are you stressing me out more, but giving me less resources or bandwidth? You can think of your calories as basically this energetic bandwidth of which you can utilize that to recover. You can use that to fuel a positive training session. I think men and women both kind of have that issue. And I think it's just, we're not really trained how to eat for sport. A lot of the dietary information we have is sort of passed down from generation to generation. And it was probably before CrossFit was super prominent. And even things like a paleo challenge, challenges are meant to be short-lived, not to be year-long lifestyles. And even something like paleo, which can eliminate some hypoallergenic foods and processed foods and, Western common, ailments we have with the Western diet, there can be sort of too much of a good thing where, more work and less food isn't necessarily better, right? Like better work or more intelligent work with better food is better, not just, beating yourself into the ground. And I think, especially for our generation and, some of the women you're referencing, we've been taught this sort of exercise mentality growing up, that you have to basically like work harder, do more, eat less. And that's how you achieve success. But really, I'd say that can be done for a short period of time or maybe for a very strategic bout, but it shouldn't be how you live year round. You should have some periodization, you should have some breaks. And really all that word means, periodization, is just planning. So you should have seasons of dieting. You should have seasons of training intensity, and basically have an ebb and flow to what you're doing in order to be successful with that long term.
And so how do you balance that? How do you personally balance your, like, just trying to train smarter and not harder?
do you go through seasons, or do you do it on a daily basis, kind of check in with yourself?
So I'm a big proponent of biofeedback and having a good understanding, which is basically just having an idea of where your body's at on a day-to-day basis. You can also, there's technology out now, like for example, Aura Ring does a great job of like giving you feedback on your readiness and HRV, body temperature, all those things, sleep quality. So I really monitor sleep quality. That's a big one for me. In terms of food and training, I will sort of cycle through training programs at this point, but a lot of what I'm doing with my training now is largely based on seasons of my business. So am I traveling a lot? Am I here? Am I quarantined? As we're kind of recording this during, COVID-19. So like training has been a little bit different versus kind of my normal seasons. I'll definitely do some stuff that's maybe more performance based, sometimes more hypertrophy based, and I try to move through that. Now, I'd say for the most part though, my training is largely based on how busy I am and what's going on in my business. It's just the time of my life that I'm in right now. And then nutrition is just paying attention to, okay, how am I sleeping on this amount? Is my energy pretty good? Am I crashing at any particular time? And I'm a big proponent too of having a coach. So for the large part of my fitness transformation and just health journey in general, I had several coaches, throughout that process. So definitely a firm believer in, if this is something new for you, having a resource or having a group to turn to or having a coach or kind of someone to point you in the right direction can be super helpful to give you some perspective on where you're at.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I couldn't agree more, for sure. And do you have a moment, an aha experience where you realized, hey, like pushing harder is not serving me? Like, did you have any type of health sort of issue or anything where you felt like it was counterproductive that really stands out?
I've had a few I think of them as sort of crossroads in my health journey. Some earlier on, like for example, when I had my head injury and like just getting a lot of testing done, a lot of blood work done, MRIs and stuff, different scans, and like having to understand. Fortunately, at that time, I was very interested in doing more like hypertrophy, muscle building type stuff, which actually kind of aligned well with where I was at. But I think where I come to realize it is like, okay, I've been doing the same thing. I'm getting the same results. At what point do I need to do something different in order to get a different result versus just kind of repeating over and over again? But a big thing for me that caused me to change both the eating style and the level of stress I was under is, this was probably 5+ years ago now, but I was training pretty intensely, had a competition earlier in the year, and ended up having some GI distress and like hormone fluctuations, fatigue, just because, I had really, really pushed it and was trying to recover, but I just, whatever went into that process, it was just a really challenging time. So that was something that sort of sticks out to me as a learning experience. But I think that's a risk that you run when you're getting very competitive with things. But I'd say for the most part, in my life, I've been fortunate enough to have coaches kind of call that out for me or maybe address it before I reach a point of no return. But earlier on in my career and in my life, I think it forced me to realize like you can't just go 110% all the time without adequate recovery. For me, I knew that I needed to get my sleep. I needed to have adequate amounts of food, or I was going to feel down in the dumps. So super important to take all that into account. And looking back over past decade or so or more, there's definitely a few instances where that came up. And it's more likely to happen when you're burning the candle at both ends. So the longer you push your training, the longer you subtract your food, you're eventually going to reach a point where your body, if you don't take a break or you don't correct your behavior, your body's going to do it for you. It's going to adapt in a way, it's going to compensate in a way to manage the situation if you don't manage the situation. So that would be my biggest sort of word to the wise, or like cautionary tale for people watching this or listening to this, is just understand that your body is very adaptive and has the ability to compensate and downregulate and adjust things. And oftentimes that's going to be our hormones. That's going to be, our thyroid or our reproductive hormones, or maybe, compromise gut health because the level of stress that we're placing on the body.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I thought it was really, I liked how you said that you just like stop seeing results too, like that's how, it's like, so many women are pushing and they're like, well, I'm just not seeing any results. And so it's like, at that point, we just need to, we think that a lot of us just push harder and think that that's just the way that's what we need to do. We just do the same approach and push harder. But really it's just being aware, like, hey, this strategy isn't working, and changing your approach. And so, yeah, that's good to keep in mind, because I think that we just tend to forget that there's like another strategy that we could be using.
Yeah.
And then, so when you did take more of a smarter approach, do you feel like it was easier for you to control hunger and cravings around food, and like it was easier for you to build more of an aesthetic look?
Yeah. So I think when when you have a better understanding of where your body's at and you're giving it more resources, more bandwidth, I think, you're going to manage appetite. I think it's psychologically challenging at first to acknowledge, like, okay, I'm in this place where I'm maybe not getting the results that I want. I'm maybe not moving in the direction that I want to be moving in. And so that can just be, that can be frustrating. And first, I think it's a mindset challenge. Number one, I think there's a mental component. But two, I did see significant improvement for me, like as I've understood kind of the seasons of where we need to go with things, and that there are fluctuations and not doing the same thing all the time. I would definitely say your body has more receptivity or sensitivity to the changes that you make. Sometimes the best plan for you is the one that you're not on. So if you've been in a calorie deficit and you've been training a certain amount, sometimes switching that up. Now, I'm not saying do that every day. I'm not saying do that every week, but maybe if you did it for a quarter or like 3 or 4 months, switch it, maybe like an 8-week block or a 12-week block or 16-week block. Okay, cool. Let's try something different. Then we move through, and maybe we make a food change first, and then we follow that through. And then maybe 8 weeks later, maybe we make, and you can update your food more often than that. Just using an example of with training styles maybe changing, just want people to understand, like, be consistent, but be open to a few times a year, maybe changing your approach and the way that you're going about everything with your training and transformation. And you asked about too. So the mental component, I think, is when you do have more food and more resources, or you're not necessarily as overtrained. I think we do see some changes in neurotransmitters. I think we do see some changes in terms of hormones, leptin and ghrelin in our body, which obviously influence appetite to a larger extent, and metabolic regulation. So I'd say, when you're able to correct for those training factors and work smarter and not necessarily harder, it may actually make it easier for you to adhere to your plan, or you may just have a better relationship with food because you're allowing yourself to have a little bit more bandwidth or a little bit more calories on a daily or weekly basis, which then it doesn't feel like you're cheating. It doesn't feel like you're going out of bounds when you're making those food choices.
Right. Yeah. That's what I noticed too. When we go into sort of the recovery mode, all of a sudden those cravings that women tend to get a lot of, they just seem to go away a lot with ease without even trying. And then that they don't need that willpower.
Yeah, for sure. I think cravings a lot of times too, it's like, it can be exposure. Like when you view something, you have like a scarcity mindset around food almost, right? So I think food is abundant when you can fit something in your daily calories, when you can fit something into your daily macros, if you're following macros, or if you're tracking portions of some kind. Basically, if you know that there's a meal where that can fit in, I think there's a lot less psychological pressure. I think we're also, we don't have this tension, right? So if we're kind of a rubber band, we draw it out. I think when we kind of come back to center, or when we have more food, we're not basically in this place of limited resources where we're going to make snap decisions. So that's just something that I would pay attention to is, do I actually eat more consistently when I have my calories higher every single day versus when I try to like deprive myself 5 or 6 days a week and then go all out and have a cheat day per se. because I've had an unhealthy relationship with food during the week. So I definitely watch out for the psychological components as well.
Hey, love, real quick, I wanted to make sure you knew that I do have spots available in my one-on-one coaching program, the Fit Chick Academy. Now, what's awesome about working with me one-on-one is you get to take literally the fast track to looking lean without having to kill yourself in the gym or kitchen anymore. My one-on-one program includes direct 24/7 access to me, weekly calls to keep you focused and on track, and a complete nutrition mindset and workout program that is designed specifically to your needs and your personal preferences. Whether you feel like you've done it all or this is your first time working with a coach, I guarantee that my program is exactly what you've been looking for and will put all your past dieting experiences to shame. If you want to learn more and see if we'd be a good fit, all you got to do is reach out to me through email or through Instagram. Now back to the show.
And do you look at how do you change your approach with like the different ages of women? So as they get older, does the type of programming change, or do you recommend that they switch up from CrossFit to a more bodybuilding style?
Yeah, so with age, I think weight-bearing exercise is still incredibly important for women due to osteoporosis. We want to be monitoring estrogen, testosterone, progesterone levels for cardiovascular risk, as well as what's going on hormonally, some of the changes that we see during perimenopause. With those women, I'm usually looking at blood sugar fluctuations and sleep quality. If we're able to get good sleep quality, if we're able to enhance recovery, and we can keep blood sugar stable throughout the day, it does seem to enhance quality of life a good bit. Walking and resistance training seem to be really solid for women in that age group that are sort of aging beyond middle age and into that kind of perimenopause stage of life. It's still very individual depending on the person. Not everyone is the same hormonally. We each kind of have our own metabolic history. So someone who's been a chronic dieter and doing lots of cardiovascular exercise, it's going to be very different than a female who's coming into that season of her life with a substantial amount of muscle and, also different history of activity, different eating style, maybe not so many chronic diets. We want to consider the depth. So how low did you go with your calories, and how long had you been on a diet? And then the frequency, how often did you try to diet? Those three factors really influence, especially at that stage of life, where women are in terms of what's going on metabolically. And then, obviously sleep is a big factor that changes as well. So, managing those lifestyle factors, I think, goes a long way. And then what you're able to get away with your training is really going to be recovery dependent, and also assuming you have your hormones in a good spot.
Yeah. And with women, well, at least a lot of the women, or I guess probably more like CrossFitters, I would say, they tend to be sort of like on the go, they kind of try to manage it all, do it all. And so they struggle to give themselves sort of that permission to rest. And so how do you suggest that they make time to like go for a walk and not feel guilty about it, like from a mindset component, like how that, or maybe they're going to a workout class and their friends are going to go hard and they realize that they're tired or they didn't get sleep. Like how would you recommend they actually intend on, following through with understanding the importance of like pulling back?
So you're saying if someone were to talk to their friend about this, or if they were to try to do it for themselves?
For themselves, yeah.
So how I would go about it is just getting some small victories. So what's going to be more realistic for you? Like if a lot of women might be hesitant to give up the training. Maybe changes happen first, but it's going to be dependent on the person. I would say trying to figure out creating a plan of attack. I wouldn't drastically shift. If you're working out 6 or 7 days a week, or you're doing 2-a-days and you're under eating, don't change every single variable at the same time. View it as a toolbox. I mean, you certainly want to start to carve out more recovery days, and you certainly want to start adding more food, but that doesn't mean go from 1,500 to 3,000 calories in the span of a week. It doesn't mean, I would start a slow reverse diet, which is basically the process of adding calories to try to get back to establish a new metabolic status quo, or kind of baseline. And then I would look at training in terms of, maybe prioritizing some compound metric based movements and resistance training, maybe doing some accessory work, but looking at what's going on with your nervous system, your parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system, trying to not be in kind of a fight or flight mode all the time. That's going to be super important. So I would recommend a reverse diet, and then looking at training holistically. Some things are going to be kind of non-negotiables, or maybe it's like a class you like to go to with your friends. But then other than that, I would say we're going to pick things based around your health, and then be tracking your sleep, your hunger, your recovery, energy, and digestion to make, changes to that protocol. If you're sort of coaching yourself through this, I would say try to identify like small food additions or meal changes that you can make. If you're, trying to make some changes with your training and you do go to a CrossFit gym, like potentially talking to the head coach at the gym, maybe you're going to be going to open gym a little bit more instead of just classes all the time, or maybe you're going to dial back your class participation in terms of, okay, I'm not going to go balls to the wall today and, have my heart rate in a super high. I'm going to go through this workout for quality, not necessarily for time. I think that's a big difference, right? So how you approach an AMRAP, how you approach, some max effort stuff, that's what's going to change. It doesn't mean you can't work out. It just means we're going to be intelligent about approaching the workouts.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So going in there with an intention, and then obviously measuring to make sure, like, hey, am I feeling better? Am I seeing better results? And that way we can get some quick wins under your belt. Okay.
Yeah.
That sounds good. So just out of curiosity, what is your favorite way to recover, and how often do you do it?
Favorite way to recover. So I'm huge on sleep for recovery. I'm big on walking. So I've been incorporating some, it's not as intense as it sounds, but I'll throw on a weight vest in the morning and I'll do like a neighborhood loop, kind of a nature walk, especially now because we're, as my buddy Anders at Barbell Shrug would say, we're kind of in captivity. So that's been kind of my go-to. But, for overall, like I think sleep is super overlooked. Otherwise for me, parasympathetic stuff is like hanging out with my dog, or I try to dabble with guitar every now and then, but I've been pretty awful about actually carving out time to do that. I've been working a lot, extra during the stay-at-home period.
Cool. Yeah, I do. I'm big on walking too, and dogs. Love that. Awesome. Okay, and so we're gonna end with this piece. So what is your one unique piece of advice that you think all listeners need to hear when it comes to trying to look fit without feeling like they're killing themselves or having to crush themselves in the gym? What's the one thing that you would recommend?
Yeah, my one big takeaway would be your metabolism is very adaptive, and basically the decisions and past choices that you've made have resulted in the present experience that you're having, right? So it's kind of like our current body is a printout of all these past transactions, all these past decisions that we've made. And we can actually train our body through reverse dieting, or the type of stimulus that we provide to it. We can basically have that adaptive nature work for us, not against us. Now, when we push ourselves into the ground, when we beat ourselves up, when we're under recovered, or really pushing our training without eating the required amount of food, we're basically training our body and our metabolism to behave in a certain way. So understanding metabolism adaptive is huge. And this is something they teach even personal trainers when you just start out. It's the SAID principles. We have specific adaptations to implied demands. Everyone talks about it with fitness or personal training when people first are learning how to prescribe sets and reps. But remember, when it comes to your food, when it comes to your hormones, your metabolism, your body's going to specifically adapt to things that you're doing to it. So if you're putting your body under a lot of stress, if you're putting your body under a vast amount of tension without sufficient recovery resources, it's kind of like your body has this WTF response of like, dude, what are you doing to me? Like, why? Like, I'm going to actually force you to recover now, because like I'm not really happy with the present situation. So my biggest thing would be, remember, we're very adaptive humans. That's kind of our nature, and that can work for us or against us, just depending on how intelligently you program.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Been there. Awesome. Okay. And so you have a free gift for the listeners, don't you?
Yes.
Would you like to explain that?
Sure. So on sammillerscience.com, I have several different free resources, just depending on, your situation, you can definitely check those out. But one thing that I have right now going on is a week of free metabolism school. So metabolism school is a 5-part video series across, over the course of a week. So what you do is you go in, sign up with your email, and then you're going to get those videos sent to you on a regular basis as part of that. We've got some different guides, and if you fall more on the coach side of things, I've got some free communities and things like that. But the biggest thing right now that I'm doing is that metabolism school as a free resource, as well as the podcast and stuff too.
Cool. And how do they get that?
So to get the access to your free week of metabolism school, there's like a really large button on sammillerscience.com. But we do have a page too. So if you go sammillerscience.com/free, when this interview goes live, they should be able to just go to sammillerscience.com/free, and it'll say like, grab your free week of metabolism school or your metabolism mini series. When you go into that, you're basically just going to go ahead, put your name. It'll ask you 1 or 2 questions, and then you'll sign up, and then it'll start sending it over email. So make sure it's something that you check fairly regularly. The topics are going to go over stress, a lot of the stuff we talked about today, regulating metabolism, understanding what's more important, energy balance, hormones, and demystifying a lot of those concepts that can be really confusing throughout the course of the transformation. So you can go ahead and grab that. That's going to be probably the best way to spend some additional time and hear the way that I teach and kind of move through things.
Cool. Awesome. All right, guys. Well, there you have it. Sam Miller, wealth of knowledge. And make sure you guys get that free metabolism school. Check out his free gift. And Sam, I really appreciate being on the show. And till next time, bud.
Yeah, it's great seeing you.
You too.